You know, windows to me are like the eyes of a house, and the shutters are just kind of an extension of that. 5 years ago, I built these shutters and they still look great, and that's because I didn't use wood. I made them out of this. This is Azek. It's made out of PVC. It cuts like wood, it sands like wood, it paints like wood, but it won't rot. It's perfect for a situation like this. Okay, so here is where we're going to actually install the shutters, and the first thing we need to do is take a measurement, but also decide whether these shutters are going to be operational, meaning open and close, or will they be decorative. And in my case, if they're going to be decorative, I'm just going to screw them directly to the house. For the measurement, I'm going to go from the top of the casing down to the top of the sill, and that is 49 inches. The width can be really anything you want, just whatever looks good. It's a design choice. Mine's kind of on the narrower side. It doesn't matter as long as you keep it consistent with all the shutters throughout the rest of the house. Now, let's go to the workshop. Okay, so I brought one of the shutters in to show you some of the details of how we're going to build this. It's very easy. You can do it. I used simply 1x4 pieces of Azek. It's a standard size. You don't have to do any ripping. We've got a cross piece on the top, a cross piece on the bottom, and of course the starfish cutout. You can use whatever you want. And then I also put a nice little trim detail around the edge. First step, cut everything to length. Like I said before, this stuff really, it cuts just like wood. Now to put that decorative edge on I mentioned earlier, we're going to use my trim router with a bit on here that puts a bevel on all four sides. These little trim routers are great. You just need to remember just to go nice and smooth and try not to rush. Okay, these are all cut and milled up. The first thing we're going to want to do is to square up the ends, and you can use, I'm using a framing square, you can use any sort of large square. This just happens to fit the size of the shutter. And you're going to line with the pieces, and the goal is to simply just get the ends all on one plane, nice and even. Okay, that looks good. And then from there, we're just going to clamp it. Now it's time for one of the most important steps, and that's attaching the cross pieces. And this is going to hold everything together. We're going to put some adhesive on here, a few screws in the back, and it'll tie it all together. Now where you position the cross piece is totally up to you. It's a design choice. I'm going to go with 3.5 inches from the bottom. So we're going to make a mark at 3.5. Then you take your cross piece and you put it right on the mark you just made. I made my cross pieces a little bit narrower than the width of the whole shutter. Then you take your speed square, and this is going to make it nice and straight. Now I'm just tracing it just so I can remember exactly where to place it. To attach the cross pieces, we're going to use really any PVC adhesive. I'm using one from Azek. We'll apply it on both surfaces, line it up, and clamp it. So you can apply the adhesive pretty much like you would do with regular wood glue. I apply it to both sides and just clamp it down. Here's the other side, and 3.5 inches just seemed to be about the sweet spot where these cross pieces would go. Yours might be different, but for this length, I think it looks good. Now I'm tracing a line around the piece because I want to use it as reference when I glue this up and know exactly where to put it. And then just clamp it up like the other one. Okay, so at this point we could just leave the clamps on overnight until the adhesive sets up, but I want to speed things along a little bit. I'm going to flip it over and screw it in from the back. Then we can take off the clamps and continue on with cutting out the starfish. All right, so I'm just flipping it over here and using some exterior screws. Now we can take off the clamps. Now it's time to cut out the starfish, and this shape I just downloaded from the internet, printed it out and cut it. You can also, of course, buy cutouts and stencils and stuff like that of any shape that you want. And where you put it on your shutter is really a preference. I like it a little bit higher, so I'm going to measure down 8 inches from this cross piece and trace it out. And you don't have to be too precise when you're tracing your cutout. My little starfish has seen better days. I've had it since I first built these shutters. I'm going to clamp it to the table just so it doesn't move around. Before you use any power tools, of course, make sure you've got proper eye protection. And we're going to start by drilling a hole right here. I'm drilling a hole first because I need somewhere to start the jigsaw. Now the key is to just kind of go slow and steady, and I'm using a really small blade because I really need to make these tight corners in this starfish cutout. That's beautiful. Okay, we're in the final stretch. All that's left to do is to sand some of the edges with some 80 grit sandpaper, and then we'll be ready for paint. Now 3 coats of a good exterior paint. This is actually a paint and primer in one. We'll let it dry, and then we can start hanging them. All right, the paint has dried. I really like the way these turned out. Now, to attach it to the house, I'm going to use exterior screws, and to make life easier, I'm going to actually start the screws down here rather than up on the ladder. So there's one last step and then we're finished, and that's to deal with these screw heads. Now I could fill them with putty, sand them and paint them, but it's just going to make it harder if I ever want to take the shutters down. So instead I'm just going to dab them with some paint. And there you go. Now the eyes of this house are looking pretty good.